So I appreciate you hanging in there, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. And thanks, Rebecca, for the invitation to present to you all tonight about Florida black bears. So as she said, my name is Chris Boyce. I'm the South Area Bear Biologist for FWC. So I do have the extraordinarily lucky job that I get to work exclusively with black bears. So a lot of biologists for FWC do have kind of a general number of species that they are responsible for, and I get to spend all of my time with bears. So we're going to talk about Florida black bears tonight exclusively. They're the only species found natively in Florida. From time to time, there will be some brown bears around, really rarely, but that's going to be only escapees from zoos and enclosures. So hopefully you don't see any of those. We're going to talk about only black bears here tonight. We're going to go over kind of a wide variety of topics. So we'll start with a little bit of history of bears in the state, and from there we'll go into some biology, which can really help us understand at a more fundamental level, I think, how bears act and how bears behave, and then how we can actually alter our behavior to coexist with them. And from there, we'll go into kind of our recommendations about how to keep bears out of the neighborhood, what to do if you do have bears in the neighborhood, and kind of just round things out with that. So to start off, we're going to talk about the history of bears in the state. Going back to the 1500s, there were, our best guess, 11,000 bears in the state. Now, that's a big guess. There was no statistical analysis of wildlife at that point. In fact, you got to go all the way until the 1980s, really, to see any kind of statistical use in wildlife. So really what we're looking at is the density of bears we have in good bear habitat now, and then extrapolating where that good bear habitat would have been pre-European colonization. So fast forward from the 1500s all the way until the 1970s, and we're down to only 500 bears in the state. And that's due to a few different reasons. Unregulated hunting and certainly habitat loss are the two major drivers of that. In 1974, black bears were listed as threatened at the state level. It's important to note that they were never listed at the federal level, but at the state level, they were listed as threatened, and most of the bear hunting in the state was closed. In 1994, those last few holdouts, which were actually national, federally held lands, those were closed as well. So no more bear hunting in the state as of 1994. In 2012, bears were actually removed from that state list with the publication of FWC's Black Bear Management Plan. And the Black Bear Management Plan is freely available if you're interested and you want to take a deep dive into how the state manages bears. Get ready to read a lot. It's about 212 pages long. And basically it goes into extraordinary detail on all the ways that bears could be threatened, land use, hunting, roadkills, things like that, and make sure that the species has protections in place for us never get back to those low numbers in the 1970s to the 1990s again. So I mentioned in 2012, bears were removed from that list, and the population has recovered so well that actually in 2015, there was a limited regulated bear hunt, only for 1 year, and then 2016 to now, bear hunting season is closed. So where do bears live in the state of Florida? The short answer is basically everywhere. So right now they take up about half the geography of the state, half the area of the state has bears living in and around it. We do break those densities down into four different amounts though. So the darker the colors on the map there, the more often you're going to see bears or higher density bear populations will be there. So you can see frequent, common, occasional, and rare. And you can see that Palm Beach County has a little bit of three of those. And if you live anywhere close to me, I live on the West Coast down here in Naples, we're pretty well set in frequent bear habitat. In fact, about a quarter of the bears in the state live right around Collier-Lee County. So how many bears are there at this point? Our last estimate is over 4,000. That's actually a little bit old at this point, so it's probably a little bit higher than that. So a full quarter of all of the bears that live in the state live kind of down by me, just on the other side of the peninsula from you folks. I show this picture a lot at presentations. It's a little bit harder to kind of get a call and response, answer question kind of thing from the audience. So we don't really do it when we're doing virtual ones, but most of the time I ask what people are seeing when they look at this photo, and the most common response I get is that they're seeing a mom and a cub next to each other. In reality, that's just an adult male black bear staying next to an adult female black bear. So bears have that sexual dimorphism where male bears are about twice as large as female bears. So 250 to 450 for males and 125 to 250 for females. Now, interestingly enough, our bears can pretty much go toe-to-toe size-wise with any bears in North America, really. So our state record for male bear is 760 pounds. State record for females is 400 pounds. Pretty sizable examples there, pretty big bears. Not only is their physiology a little bit different, but their behavior is different too. So we do see males having a much wider home range of 62 square miles versus females only 15 square miles. And I'll show you on the map in the next slide what that really looks like. In addition to that, male bears are generally more risk-taking. We often do see more dispersing juvenile bears moving into neighborhoods with more frequency, and female bears are more secretive and more careful. So what does a male versus a female black bear home range look like? These three examples right here, those are male black bear real home ranges. We collected these from collar data. It's about 8 miles by 8 miles. That's a pretty big chunk of land. In fact, that's so much land that if you do have a bear, that you're seeing regularly in your yard or in your neighborhood, weeks or months can go by as he's making the rounds before he comes back again. So you may think the bear problem or the bear issue you're having is done. You can kind of relax a little bit. And it really just means the bear is kind of on the patrol and he very well could move right back in. Now contrast that with these female bear examples, pretty significantly small compared to the male bear ranges. It's really two of the most amazing things about black bears are their breeding strategy and then the hibernation strategy that they have. So we'll talk about both here. So breeding is in June or July. So a few months passed from now, breeding season was in full swing. What bears have is called delayed implantation. And this is a really interesting breeding strategy. Basically, when bears mate, female bears will have eggs that are fertilized. Those fertilized eggs won't actually implant in the uterus for months later. So what that does is that gives the female an opportunity to put on as much weight with as much good nutrition as she possibly can. And her body will actually be able to hormonally signal how many cubs she's ready to raise. So if the acorn crop is really good, if the saw palmetto crop is really good, and that bear has gotten just a ton of nutrition, she could have 2, 3, 4, even 5 cubs. Contrast that, maybe the acorn crop has failed. It's just not a good year for it. Maybe someone waved a magic wand and everybody's got their trash secured, which would certainly make my job a lot easier. But maybe there's some kind of calorie restriction in place. Her body will be able to hormonally signal to her that she should have fewer cubs just so she has enough nutrition and enough ability to support those cubs. So June or July is when mating season happens. Fast forward all the way until February, that's when cubs are born in the dens. And when they're born, they're about the size of a can of soda. So only about 12 ounces. Like I said in the last slide, 1 to 5 possibly, 1 to 5 possible cubs per litter. The average is around 2 or 3. I think it's about 2.3 for South region where we are. By April, they'll be 5 pounds. So it's actually a pretty amazing movement from when they're born to when they're actually mobile. When they're born, they're totally dependent on the mother. So completely deaf, completely blind. They're just going to be nursing on her all the way until April, when she finally does take them out of the den to start showing them, how to move through the woods, how to find natural foods, that kind of stuff. So I mentioned I would talk a little bit about hibernation. Black bears are not what we call true hibernators. They have this kind of modified hibernation, or ursid hibernation it's called. It basically means that when the females, especially with cubs, when the females make up a den, and if you want to picture a den in your head, Florida bear dens are really kind of sparse compared to other states with more severe winters. It can just be a whole pile of palm fronds scraped together, usually in really dense thickets, so she can have a lot of warning if something's approaching. So she'll actually scrape that together, lay down, and then for 4 months, she won't eat, drink, or use the bathroom while those cubs are born, develop, and she nurses them all the way until April. So black bear hibernation is an amazing thing. It's actually being studied by several medical universities for a number of reasons. One, black bear bone density doesn't decrease. In fact, it can be a little bit higher when they come out of hibernation, which a lot of osteoporosis research is currently looking at. And second, imagine not having anything to eat or anything to drink while nursing cubs for 4 months. A lot of kidney function, renal function research is looking at that as well. So by the time April rolls around, The little bears are up walking around with mom, and they're going to stay with her for a full year and a half, a full 18 months as they grow older and become independent. So another kind of shocking thing, I think, for a lot of folks out there is what black bear diet looks like in Florida. Usually, I guess you're going to hear me make fun of TV shows and movies a lot throughout this presentation because I think they give us a pretty unrealistic expectation of how bears interact with the world. Whenever there's a black bear in a movie, it's this king of the forest running, tackling the hero, wanting to actively hunt the hero or whatever. Frothing at the mouth, up on 2 feet, ready to take on anything. When black bears are really close to being vegetarian. So a full 73% of their diet is plants. That can be acorns, berries, shoots and roots from grasses, all sorts of stuff. Another 22% is insect matter. Usually that's colonial insects like ants or termites where they can break a log apart and get to a lot of the larvae in there. That leaves only about 5% for meat. And unfortunately for these animals, opossums and armadillos, they have a tendency, their strategy towards survival is to play dead. And the bear says, hey, that's a free snack, and we'll consume them. Bears are also not hesitant to consume roadkill carrion. So if deer gets hit by a car and makes it into the woods a little bit, a bear will happily take that free snack as well. So most folks are probably familiar with the terms nocturnal, maybe even diurnal. So nocturnal means active at night, diurnal active during the day. Bears are a little bit in between that. It's what we call crepuscular. So they're active most at twilight and then again at dusk. So the shadows are long. The dark coloration of the bear really helps it blend into the environment. Their eyesight's very similar to ours. It might be a little bit better at night, we think. But they want a little bit of daylight out there so they can kind of navigate the world. An interesting shift we do see is that bears in suburban and urban areas are kind of shifting towards a more nocturnal strategy. And that to us indicates that they're fully aware that while the porch light is on or the TV is still on, you can still come out and yell at them when they're getting into the garbage. So they've actually shifted that behavior so they're going to be interrupted less frequently by human activity. I'm going to play this short clip and we'll talk about it afterwards. It's a little bit, it's an example of a little bit of how bears communicate with each other and the fact that you heard me mention that they have home ranges and not territories. So unrelated bears will tolerate each other coming close. They have totally overlapping home ranges. They're not these fierce defenders of that range. Every border they have, they're willing to allow some interlopers to come in. Now in this video, the bear in the bottom left, the largest bear, that's an adult female, and the one right in the center and the one in the upper left, those are her cubs. So that means the top bear and the right bear, those are unrelated. And we'll talk a little bit about what happens with this after I play the video. So you can see she's tolerant of those unrelated bears sharing that food resource, but when they get a little bit too close, she throws that mama bear dominance around and is able to push them off pretty well. Continuing on behavior, what we see 90% plus of the time in terms of bears that are threatened by anything is going to be avoidance. So running, climbing, and hiding. Bears are extraordinarily powerful climbers. You can see this bear is well off the ground, didn't need any supportive branches, was just able to haul itself up right on that basically naked tree. And if you don't believe me that they practice avoidance, right there is an 8-pound orange house cat. That's what got this bear in the tree. And the amazing thing about this story is the bear was treed by this cat. The cat walked away, the bear came back down. It was actually treed a second time by just that little orange house cat. So what that indicates to us is that bears, if they're threatened by anything that they don't understand, even things that really aren't a threat, it's just not worth tangling with, they're going to run, hide, and climb. It's not worthwhile to get in fights with things you're not sure of the outcome of. We get in a fight, we go to the hospital, we get better. Bears get in a fight, that's calorically taxing. That's going to mean days possibly of recovery and injury that could be with them for months or years. It's not worth it to get into the fight, so they just kind of get out of there. All right, time to make fun of movies number 2. The bear up on two legs always is the last thing the hero sees before he or she gets, attacked by the bear. If you've ever seen a penguin walk on two legs, you've seen a bear walk on two legs. So this is really more of a curiosity posture for them, not an aggressive one at all. They want to get a little bit better sight of their surroundings, a little bit better smell, up on their hind legs, they can get a little bit more wind current going. I mentioned that their eyesight is very similar to ours. Again, maybe slightly better at night. Their hearing is about twice as acute as ours, so pretty good hearing. But it's really their sense of smell that sets them apart from basically any animal their size in the world. Just to kind of give you a benchmark of how bears interact with the world, we usually think of like bloodhounds as a good indicator, a good example of something with a very powerful sense of smell. And it's true, they're about 300 times better sense of smell than we have. Well, bears are 7 times more sensitive than bloodhounds. So a full 2,100 times better sense of smell than we have. And you might think, wow, that's amazing, 2,100 times, but I could say 1,000,000 times, I could say 50 times. We wouldn't really understand, because we don't see the world through our noses, what that means. And just to kind of give you an example, imagine I place you right down at the 50-yard line in the biggest football stadium you've ever been in, and I put a chicken wing up on row 7, seat J, and the wind blows just right. That bear is going to be able to tell exactly where that scent is coming from. It really is that powerful. In fact, we've seen proof that it's at least a mile, and it's probably a little bit more than that they're able to navigate the world through that sense of smell. We'll play this video now. This is going to kind of give you an idea of how bears do interact with the world. I'm not going to talk through it because I think it's really cool seeing it from start to finish. I will give you the perspective that you're seeing, because that can be a little bit confusing at first. What you're doing is you're actually looking down the ladder of a tree stand. You can see the hunter's green boot in the bottom right. I'm just going to let this play and we'll talk about it after.
Hey, what are you doing there? What are you doing there?
That's one of my favorite videos. He just looks so embarrassed in his, the bear's face. Just looks so embarrassed. So, what did you see there as far as bears interact with the world? That bear at any point could have looked straight up into the hunter's eyes. He doesn't really use those eyes to investigate what he's looking at. Likely he smelled something interesting, or he was just curious about checking the scenario out, was really using that sense of smell. Maybe the hunter is using some kind of scent lure that attracted him. Maybe he's using scent blocking clothing that blocks kind of or masks a little bit of what he really is. The bear just wanted to see it. As soon as the hunter identifies himself, the bear looks right up into the hunter's eyes, into the camera, says, "Oh shoot, there's a person up there," sheepishly backs off and runs away. Now we'll talk a little bit about what defensive and warning behaviors look like for black bears. These are often reported as aggressive behaviors, but it's really exactly the opposite. So when we talk about these, I want you to think about a rattlesnake. Ask yourself, does a rattlesnake rattle its tail before it strikes a mouse? The answer is no, right? The rattlesnake rattles its tail when something it doesn't want to strike is too close, like us or something our size. The rattlesnake doesn't make any noise at all before it strikes a mouse. So really what the bear is doing is letting us know we're too close, we're in their personal space, and there's still time to de-escalate the situation. Excuse me. So we'll play this video 2 times, one in full speed and then again in slow motion. And I want you to look for jaw popping, huffing will be very obvious. This bear kind of charges and then stomps the ground. Her ears are pinned back, and she doesn't really make eye contact with the person she's charging. This is called the bluff charge, and it's not uncommon. It can be very scary, but it's important to realize that these are defensive postures. There's that huff. There's the jaw pop. The ears are pinned back. Doesn't really make eye contact, kind of looking away, shifting back and forth, and then she gives ground. And I realized that me sitting here in my safe house and you sitting there in your safe house and telling you, don't worry, this is just defensive or warning behavior, is a pretty easy thing to do versus when you're standing in the forest and a bear potentially bluff charges you. But really, this behavior is the exact opposite of the behavior we see in states where there are predatory attacks. There are no warning signs like these. The bear will be very silent. It'll just be stalking a person. There aren't any of these behaviors that we see. It is important. I'll say it here and then I'll say it again in one of the slides coming up here. It's really important in situations like this to stand your ground. You don't want to turn and run and trigger any kind of prey response. And again, easy for me to say, but it really is that important to stand your ground if you do come this close to a bear. So what's a bear encounter versus a bear attack? A bear encounter is anytime you can safely see a bear. So maybe you're out taking a walk and you see one from 100 yards away. Maybe you're out on your back porch and there's a bear, 20 yards away, but you've got your house right there. It's got a safe place to retreat to. You feel free to take photos of it. Talk quietly, let people know it's there. I do ask that you don't get any closer to take a selfie. I wish I didn't have to say that, but enough folks have tried that it is worth pointing out that it does happen from time to time. It's a really cool experience. If you haven't seen a bear before, especially in the woods, if they don't know you're there, it's really cool. I think we can see a lot of kind of anthropomorphic behavior in bears. They're a really emotive species, which is really neat. And just seeing them go about their day is a pretty special experience. Now, contrast that with a bear attack. And that means that contact between a person and a bear is inevitable. And what do we say to do in that case? You may have heard this already, but for black bears, absolutely anything you can to fight back. So punching, kicking, gouging, screaming, elbows, knees, whatever you can do to convince that bear. Remember, they only are really interested in armadillos and opossums playing dead. You want to convince that bear that you're not an easy snack. It's going to be expensive calorically. The bear could get injured, and that will almost assuredly get the bear to back off. We have not had a person killed by a bear in the entire history of the state of Florida, and I know. There are a lot of folks out there who are pretty concerned seeing bears in the neighborhood from time to time. Really, really low risk. I would never tell you to totally trust wildlife. Obviously don't turn your back on it, anything like that. But if you have a bear in the neighborhood, don't be afraid to go out of your house. Don't think like you're a prisoner there or anything like that. They really are going to run and leave most of the time. I will say there are some strategies to use if there is a bear report in the neighborhood. Certainly, I would always keep my dog on a leash. Especially after those dark hours start. You don't want to walk out and surprise a bear with a dog off leash. Dogs and bears really don't get along very well. When I'm in in-person presentations, I usually ask people to guess what breed of dog gets tangled up with bears most often in the state of Florida, and almost without issue, someone always says Chihuahua, and that's the right answer. So Chihuahuas, I guess, still remember when they were wolves, and forget that they weigh about 4.5 pounds, and it doesn't usually go well for the Chihuahua. So how do we influence bears in the state of Florida? Well, a couple of different ways. So it's important to point out there are 21 million people in the state of Florida and 120 million visitors every year. So that's a hugely dense population, and we have 4,000 plus bears. That's a lot of opportunity, and especially if they're in half the state, that's a lot of opportunity for bears and people to come in contact with each other. So the two major ways we influence them are habituation, and that's where bears become accustomed to people. Maybe they get a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. Nothing bad happens, so they're losing their fear of us a little bit. Not necessarily bad on its own. The other way is food conditioning, and that's when they start associating humans with food sources. So unsecured garbage, bird feeders, that kind of thing. Outdoor pet food is a pretty major one as well. A bear that is still afraid of people can be a food conditioned bear. So they're not going to approach anytime we're outside or even down the street. They're going to wait till the middle of the night, and then they're going to get into the garbage. Still, totally afraid of people. It's when those two things come together. So you have a bear that's unafraid of people and you have a bear that's food conditioned. That's where we start to get a little bit nervous about that bear's behavior. So this picture on the right here, that's pretty much the bear biologist's nightmare scenario. I really hope this was in some sort of enclosure experience kind of place, because if this is a wild bear, this is a major red flag for us. We take hand feeding of wildlife and hand feeding of bears extremely seriously. Of course, it's illegal, and we will not hesitate to use our law enforcement division to try and get this to stop. It's really not fair to the bear as well, because you're taking that choice away from the bear. And once bears become this food conditioned, it can be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to lose that. And so a lot of the time, the bear will have to be killed by the management agency in this scenario. So it's not fair to the bear. It's not fair to other people around who aren't aware that there's a hand-fed bear in the neighborhood. And that can become a public safety risk as well. So I point this out, and I'm a little bit serious about this only because, from time to time, if you do have a bear in the neighborhood, sometimes people can feel bad for that bear. They can start purposely leaving food out. And that's a really important thing that we stop doing or not let happen. Or if it is happening, please report it to us. You can report it totally anonymously, and we can go from there. But we really do have to ensure that this doesn't occur. So what are the common sources of bear conflict? Well, there's a couple of them. Attractants is going to be the major one. And of the attractants you see here, that's garbage, outdoor pet food, bird feeders, and actually unclean grills is kind of a major attractant. Remember how good that steak smelled last week? Bears can smell from a mile away. That's going to bring them in as well. Garbage is by far the most important one for us. So how many bear calls do we get statewide for the agency? Well, about 5,000. So of my position, there are 5 in the state. So I cover the southernmost 22 counties, and I get about 1,000 to 1,200 calls from those 22 counties every year. There's a bear biologist in the central part of the state, in the Ocala area. She only has 4 counties, and she gets exactly the same number of calls. So it's all about bear density and human density and kind of where those cross together. Why are we getting calls about bears? 40% is just to report that they're seen. And I don't mean to say that in a dismissive way, because it's really important that we do get reports from the public about where bears are. I said before, there's only 5 of me for the state, so there's no possible way for me to keep tabs on where bears are occurring. There may be new neighborhoods that we can kind of get some education and outreach in ahead of time. Maybe there's a new neighborhood that suddenly goes from 0 calls to 20 calls a week, and it's because no one there is keeping the garbage secure, and we can get in and make that change. So it's really important that we do have the public out there kind of as our eyes and ears looking for bears. Another 30% is bears and garbage. So I mentioned before, that's the major attractant. If we could, wave a magic wand and have all the trash secured and lump in the general reports, that's already 70% of all the calls we get in the state. Another 12% is property damage. The most frequent property damage that I see from bears is usually something as small as just ripple and eye screens. From time to time, we do get some ornamental plant damage. Unfortunately, bears don't really care that that's a $2,000 exotic ornamental palm, and that they really don't bother at all, just tearing the top off and eating the palm heart out, and that's the end of that palm. Not very considerate, bears are. Another 11% is sick or dead bears. So the major cause of death for bears involving people is going to be automobile hits, so road hits. I think last year was actually our record year. We had about 287, if I remember correctly, bears killed by cars. That's statewide. And of course, we do from time to time get bears illegally killed. People do shoot them thinking that they're going to stop whatever interaction they're having. They feel threatened by them, that kind of thing. 3% is bear and animal encounters, and by far the most common, as I mentioned before, is dogs. Bears and dogs really don't like each other. There are some domestic livestock issues with bears too. It doesn't happen all that frequently, but I'd say a couple times a year in some of my 22 counties, there is going to be a few chickens depredated, possibly a goat depredated by a bear, something like that. So it is important to note that feeding bears in the state of Florida is illegal, and you might think, well, of course it is. That makes perfect sense. One extra step that we've taken here is that it's actually illegal to unintentionally feed bears. So that doesn't mean that if you call our agency and say, hey, a bear got into my garbage, the first step we're going to take is not to say, oh, well, you deserve a ticket. That's just not how we do it. Obviously, no one would ever call us again. Really, that gives us kind of some legal frameworks and legal teeth if there are people who are consistently having, say there's a business that has an unsecured dumpster, they're actually allowing multiple bears to come in, maybe they're even, advertising the bears come by, or, by word of mouth, it becomes kind of a show. And that gives our agency the ability to tamp down on that. And it starts off with just a written warning, but it can ramp up if it's particularly egregious. So in this example here of a hand feeding a donut to a bear, that can actually be a low-level felony. So we do have, I mentioned before, our law enforcement division is ready and willing to help the management folks kind of get this message out there. So how do we keep bears out of garbage? Well, for commercial garbage, it's pretty simple. Bears are really good at peeling those plastic lids back, pretty much like a banana. There really isn't much to stop them when it comes to that. The way we almost exclusively tell people to go is, I think there's a highlight here. Yeah, you just get a metal topped dumpster with a sliding side door. Bam, bear resistant dumpster. Just that simple. I actually prefer those. I've lived in places where we had communal plastic lidded dumpsters, and you had to hold the lid up with one hand while you swung your whole week's worth of garbage in the other one. I prefer the sliding metal side doors. It is important to note, though, that every night, actually, when they're not in use, they should always have that carabiner or some kind of locking mechanism closing it, because there have been, from time to time, people who go out at middle of the night to throw some trash in the dumpster, and a bear comes charging out of that and runs into the woods, right by them, which is a pretty scary thing. Of course, the same thing can totally happen with those plastic lidded dumpsters. So it really can be that simple. There's also a company out there called Impact Plastics that makes kind of those plastic lids you see on the left that actually have a metal lattice work underneath, so they can't be bent back like that. And that's a way we recommend to take care of that as well. So for residential garbage, it's a little bit more complicated in some ways and simpler in others. What we recommend right off the bat is that if you have bear issues in the neighborhood, and this is really kind of just for general knowledge, obviously we're not seeing repeat and consistent bears getting in garbage where any of you folks probably live, if you do live over on the East Coast there. But maybe if you do see them from time to time, it's just a good habit to get into right off the bat. Just changing the time you put garbage out from the night before to the morning of pickup is a huge reduction in the amount of bear garbage interactions we get. So I mentioned before, those urban bears, they're shifting towards that more nocturnal strategy. Once it's 7, 8, 9 in the morning, people are going to work, people are out walking dogs, people are out jogging. It's much less likely to roll up on a neighborhood and see 20 or 40 of those cans knocked down in a row. And that's not an exaggeration. I promise you, if you know that Tuesday is trash day, all the bears in the area know Tuesday is trash day too, because we will consistently see bears hone in on streets and knock 10 or 20 of those down in a row. Another option is retrofitting garbage cans. So if you do have bears in the neighborhood, maybe you've got property somewhere else and you're interested in keeping bears out of that property. If you don't have a place like a garage or a shed to store those garbage cans, you can actually modify them. We've got plans for this on our website, and the website is linked down there below. It's pretty easy. If you type in my FWC or FWC and bear, you'll certainly get to our website with all the stuff that I'm talking about here today. But it really can be as simple as putting a few holes in the top and then either putting nylon strapping or some kind of metal carabiner and eye loop enclosure. It just prevents the bears from being able to get a hold to pull that lid open. And that works pretty well. The downside there, of course, is that you do have to unclasp those the morning of trash pickup or the night before trash pickup. We also have plans on the website if you're looking to build that exterior shed. We have plans that'll fit two cans, two 90-gallon cans side by side, so a recycling and a trash can next to each other. It's basically just a couple of 4x4s and then armored with 2x4s kind of plated around it, and that can be an easy way to keep those garbage cans secured as well. A more recent innovation, and we're seeing kind of new designs come out all the time, are actually bear-resistant garbage cans, so specifically purpose-built garbage cans made to resist bear activity. And they can be a major game changer. So we had a study run up in Volusia County where hundreds of these were tested out in a neighborhood, and they saw not just bear break-ins for garbage, which was actually reduced by 100%, but bear activity in the entire neighborhood of all kinds fell by more than 60%. So, when I keep saying that garbage is the major attractant for bears in the neighborhood, we've got the science to back it up. So keeping garbage secured is really important, and these cans can be an amazing way to do it. Some of the more advanced cans actually will not require you to unclasp them when trash pickup is coming around. So they actually have a spring and ball bearing. So when it's fully inverted, then the garbage can top will automatically pop open. And in order for these to be deployed in the state, they do have to be tested using captive brown bears currently. So they are put in a pen. They have to survive, I think it's 60 minutes, where a large male brown bear is stomping on it, clawing at it. And if they are able to resist that, they do get certified. So they work really well, and there's a whole different number of them available. So I mentioned bird feeders as attractants before, and our recommendation for bird feeders is to, well, either take them in at night, and I keep waiting for someone to correct me on this, but I've never met anybody who does nighttime bird watching. So I think, taking them in at night is a really simple thing. If you can't take them in, then getting them off the ground is really important, or really a good strategy. So our recommendation is about 10 feet off the ground and at least 4 feet from the nearest tree. But if you do have a classically trained Cirque du Soleil bear, it's possible that they can actually circumvent even that and access the bird seed anyway. So these poor folks, they took the advice, and they happened to get the one bear out there who's just ready to overcome that and go for it anyway. You can see the old pole from the ground-based bird feeder and the squirrel baffle on the ground there. So now that I've kind of given all the technical advice out about securing attractants, what's FWC's policy when it comes to bears? So the major emphasis we go by is that it's personal responsibility. So if we live around wildlife, it's personal responsibility in terms of keeping us in a peaceful coexistence with that wildlife. So rather than someone calls and says, give me a garbage can that doesn't let bears in, we actually emphasize that that's the person's responsibility to keep garbage secured. We're happy to give all the technical assistance that could be wanted over the phone, and it's really going to be all about securing those attractants. Not only securing attractants, but in a few slides here, we'll talk about how to keep bears uncomfortable around the neighborhood so that they don't feel safe, they don't feel nice and want to stay. But really, it's all about keeping that garbage and other attractants secured, because even if we were to pick up a bear and move it, it's just going to be a revolving door for that next bear coming in. And so one of the most common questions I get is, I have a bear problem. Why aren't you guys going to come and take that bear away? And that's a good question. It's kind of a complicated answer, at least a little bit. Most of the time, people want us to take it to the woods. And where is the woods, right? Is there any really good bear habitat that doesn't have a whole bunch of bears in it already? So what we've actually seen from time to time is that about 70% of the bears we pick up and put in the woods, relocate to some state land. About 70% of those either return right to where they were picked up from. I think Arizona had one went about 165 miles right back to where they caught it because the eating was so good there. Or they'll just wander into somebody else's neighborhood, and that's just kind of passing the buck onto somebody else. Really, there aren't any remote or empty areas left. So while I'm not saying we don't relocate bears, but it is one of our absolute last resorts. And it's really only going to work as a Band-Aid to give that person or that homeowners association or community time to get those attractants secured by the time that bear wanders back. So bears in neighborhoods. What do we do in this kind of situations? It's probably my least popular advice is basically to hurry up and wait. So we've got, it looks like the power company, the neighbors, the homeowners, I think the homeowners' cousins and nephews, a couple law enforcement agencies. Somebody brought a cherry picker there, which I always thought is, I think that's really funny. It's literally my job to handle bears, and I'm not going up in a cherry picker to get that bear out of the tree. Really, if it found its way in, it'll find its way back out. I can actually assure you that in the 3 years I've been at this job, I have never had a bear in a tree the morning after it was called in. So, oftentimes, if dusk is 8 o'clock, that bear is gone by 8:15. Really just backing off, giving it space. If it is in that tree, it was able to climb into that tree, it's really unlikely that it'll have any trouble getting back out. It's important that we don't chase or corner it, of course, but really just getting human activity down to a minimum will allow that bear to come back out. And I do want to touch on a few slides here. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with the incident that did happen where the bear was killed by Palm Beach County deputies. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it. The sheriff's statement and our statement are full of details and they're freely available. I just kind of want to go over really basically what happened and then what our response is moving forward and that kind of thing. So the bear was up in a tree about 50 feet tall. There was some discussion about dart rifles to chemically immobilize the bear. One kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily a myth to dispel. We get asked a lot, why don't we just come in and tranquilize the bear? If you haven't seen an animal actually be tranquilized, especially in the field, it's not what movies usually show. So, when a person gets hit by a tranquilizer dart, it goes into the neck and they just fall over in 2 seconds. What we're really talking about is 10 to 15 minutes of a gradually more unresponsive animal. And 10 to 15 minutes is a long time for that bear to be able to move from wherever it was darted to wherever it's finally going to fall asleep with a really unpredictable movement pattern from there. And, as I mentioned, it gets, more and more woozy as time goes on. So you can have bears wander into roads and fall asleep. You can have bears wander into ponds and fall asleep. It can be, not only that, but you're also slinging drug-filled darts through a neighborhood. So really, I mentioned trapping as our last resort. Free-range darting is even laster than that, if you'll forgive me that phrase. But we did have a bear up in a tree, 50 feet tall. So already 50 feet off the ground is a pretty significant height for a bear to fall. If we did dart it, it's well outside what we would consider safe for that. Unfortunately, so we did have officers in the scene, some of our officers. Palm Beach County also had some of their sheriff's deputies on scene, and their leadership, their command structure authorized them to shoot the bear. We were planning to just back off and let that bear go. Now, those deputies and that command structure, they felt that bear was a safety threat. We released an investigative report after that. I do have a lot of positivity to report moving forward. We had a really good meeting with Palm Beach County sheriffs after that, a really good meeting, really kind of defined our partnership moving forward. We have a much clearer communication structure at this point, and we're going to be in a much better place. I really don't think we're going to see anything like this happening again in this agency or in this county. In fact, we've offered training to more than 2,500 law enforcement staff from 120 agencies in the last 15, 16 years, something like that. So we're going to do some trainings with them, really kind of, dispel the myth that the bears are dangerous and kind of defer to FWC law enforcement from there. So I mentioned before that, major securing attractants is one of the major ways to keep bears out of neighborhoods. Well, the other major way is to make sure bears don't feel comfortable living in that community, in that neighborhood. So human dominance is at the top of the list. And what that means is that you can use your dominating presence to scare almost every bear away. It takes a really conditioned bear to withstand being yelled at sternly by a person. And I know that sounds a little strange because they're such large animals and, it's just you yelling at a bear, but I'll save my favorite video in the presentation for just about the last slide, and we'll go back to human dominance. From there, you can kind of advance to banging pots and pans. They really don't like loud noises. They're easily startled by loud noises. So motion-activated lights and alarms work really well. The motion-activated alarms, they're really good as long as you don't have close neighbors who are going to be upset that every 3 a.m. cat that walks by sets off basically something as loud as a car alarm. You're not going to be very popular if you live in an area like that. But if you live in a more rural place, motion-activated lights and alarms are really good. Motion-activated sprinklers, that's the thing kind of in the middle there that looks like a crow. You just basically hook it up to your hose, and then it has an infrared beam that comes out. So every time the bear walks up to it, maybe walking up to the garage door or something like that, it gets sprayed in the face with that sprinkler on top. We've got great videos of that working really well. Bear spray is on the list, certainly. I'm actually going to go into more detail on that on the next slide. And if anybody wants more detail on it, we can certainly circle back to it later. Something that a lot of folks are a little bit surprised to see is that we do promote the use of paintball guns on bears to haze them. So if you've got a bear on your property, remember, you're not going out into the woods looking for bears to paintball. If you've got a bear, especially repeatedly coming onto your property, we do allow people to use paintballs and slingshots to kind of deter them. It's just important you keep it away from the face, obviously, on the hind end. I use paintballs on bears all the time to haze them out of neighborhoods. Is kind of my response. We use paintballs almost every time we are relocating bears to, again, reinforce that people aren't good and people are mean and people mean pain. You know, paintballs, if you've never been hit by a paintball, people routinely sign up to shoot paintballs at each other as a sport. Yeah, they hurt, but you know, bears are tanks, and at the end of the day, you might have just a little welt, and that's it. It doesn't ache for days or anything like that. I've never seen a bear stand its ground. I've only seen bears actively fleeing when I've been using paintballs on them. Firecrackers is on the list too, only because it's legal. I do want to make sure that everyone knows that it's, you've got to be very careful in your throw when you're using firecrackers. You don't want to throw so far that the firecrackers go over the bear, and now you're the exit on the way away from that noise. So just be really careful about that. I do get asked a few times if BB guns or air rifles are okay. They're absolutely not. So we have had bears killed, usually unintentionally by air rifle pellets, just very lucky shots that make it through the heart and lungs. It doesn't take a whole lot if the shot is perfect to kill a bear. So I do ask that everybody stays away from that. Even if you think you're aiming for the rump, we've had people who are just scaring them away from chickens, and they miss their shot by a little bit, and it misses the hip and cross sections across the body, and that was it. So bear spray, I get asked a lot about bear spray, how to use it, how effective it is, all that stuff. So I'm happy to talk about this. Do I think everybody on here in Palm Beach County should go out and buy a can of bear spray and have it on their hip all day, every day? Not really. But if you do spend some time in the woods, if you are a hiker or something like that, and you want to have that extra precaution, I think it's a great idea. Every time I'm in the woods, I've got one on my hip. Of course, most of the time I'm looking for a bear when I'm in the woods as part of my job, so that makes a lot of sense. It is time after time shown to be the most effective deterrent for stopping a human-bear encounter. So there are some awesome videos out there you can look up if you're interested in how it works. It's basically like pepper spray times 1,000, and it doesn't come out like a gel or a stream. It comes out kind of like a fire extinguisher. So a big cloud of kind of red gas comes out and settles onto the ground in front. The way we recommend using it is 2 or 3 second bursts right in the ground to get into the grass. It'll stop charging mother brown bears in their tracks. I've seen a great video where these 2 hikers accidentally got with 2 brown bear cubs on one side and a charging mom on the other side, and they sprayed it the right way, and she got a big lung full of it, turned around and ran right back into the woods. So it really does work. It's important to know 2 things. One, where that bear spray is when you do need it. So, if you've got bear spray at the bottom of your backpack, you may as well have left it at home. It's not going to do you any good. It's got to be right on your hip, right on your belt, in a very easily accessible way. And it's important to know too how to actually make it work. So, it doesn't do you any good if you've never looked at the can. You don't know how the safety works on it. You can't get the safety cap off. It's important to know how that works, just so you can deploy it really quickly. Now, the effective range is about 25 feet, so significant distance you can put between you and the bear. You do have to take a little bit of consideration of the wind into account. You're probably going to get some secondary effects from it, and I can tell you that it's not a good day. I've gotten just wisps of it before from deploying pepper-like products like this, and it clears those sinuses out pretty quick. You'll be crying, your nose will be running really badly. It'll be hard to catch kind of a full breath. But is that worth deterring a bear from contacting you? 100%, absolutely. I do get people who say I don't need bear spray. I've got a 44 Magnum on my hip, and to those people I say good luck. I guess you've got to make the best shot you've made your whole life in about 2 or 3 seconds. It's unlikely to happen. Bear spray is a lot easier to dispense, to use. And at the same time, if we're walking into a bear's habitat, it's not really fair for the first option to deter them to be a lethal option, right? It'd be like walking into their house and saying, well, if they look at me wrong, I'll shoot them. That's not a good stewardship of the land. So having a non-lethal option ahead of time, if you want to have the firearm as a backup, you're well within your rights to. I just ask that not be the first line of defense. So I mentioned before that I would show you a great video about human dominance. It's my favorite video in the whole thing. I'm not going to talk about it first. It's just worth seeing it from start to finish.
Let me go in your office because he might come after me.
Get down! Right now! Go! No! No! Down!
I love it every time. So for anybody who hasn't had a lot of experience with bears, that's a pretty good sized black bear. You know, that was a 400, 500 pound bear, probably outweighed that woman by a factor of 3 or 4 easily. And because she spoke in a determined, stern manner, you know, her body language was strong. She was in a safe place. She had a place to retreat to. Adding that human dominance could be a big help in keeping bears out of the neighborhood and uncomfortable from lingering or staying around you. So just to kind of recap quickly, it does take some time for bears to learn that attractants are secure. So if you do have a bear in the neighborhood that keeps hitting the garbage and you say, well, I ratchet strapped it finally last night, or I put a retrofit kit on it last night, why is there still a bear around? We can actually see a 3-week delay from the time that bears finally, recognize that attractant is now secured to the time they say, well, it's not worth it because those are secured every time I check. But they do return periodically to check. So it's important that if you do want to take these steps, and I recommend that everybody does, the nice thing about having things secured for bears is that they're secured for almost everything else. So if you've got your garbage secured against bears, you've also got it secured against raccoons or other wildlife, which is really nice. Not having them lingering around, not having them scattering garbage around the yard is really good. But I have had people that I have personally set electric fences up to keep their garbage secured, and that bear checked back often enough that the one day they left it off, that bear had a smorgasbord in there, just tore the whole thing apart. So, it's really important to be vigilant, to stay on top of it, and to keep scaring the bears and keep those attractants secured. It really only takes one step up to have that pattern start repeating again. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I appreciate everybody stopping by and listening. Hopefully it was worthwhile information for you all. I'm happy to take some questions now, as long as we've got time, Rebecca. It's your show, so I'm happy to stick around.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm totally down to answer some questions. So I don't think anyone can, maybe you can unmute yourself, but if you want to unmute and ask a question, you're more than welcome to, or preferably in the chat, just so we can kind of field them as they come in. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. But Chris, I do want to say thank you. This was awesome. I really, really appreciate it. Oh yeah, no question. Absolutely happy to do it.
So Chris, this is the other Amy, the real Amy, with Busch Wildlife. And I just really wanted to say thank you so much for talking about, kind of letting natural migration happen, letting the bear move along on its own way, because with the 2 instances that we've had here locally, the one being the Palm Beach County Sheriff Bear, and the other one being Center Street, the initial reaction was always, dart it. Why aren't you darting it? And so I greatly appreciate you having that in your presentation, and just kind of dispelling the myths of how quick darting can take place and all, sure. And how dangerous, those after effects are, especially in an uncontrolled situation. I don't even like doing it. We have worked, I can't say we, our animal care team, not myself, but our keepers have worked very hard to train our bears to take injection on a daily basis in case of an emergency, just because darting in even a captive situation has such risk involved. So I greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much. Because I know some of our volunteers and stuff are on here and we've had this discussion. So it's great to hear from another source.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any questions coming in the chat? I can't really
So it does look like there's one question from Dawn that just asks, how long can a bear live for?
So what we're seeing in Florida is usually about 10 to 12 years is going to be the wild lifespan for bears. I think in captivity, I want to say the record's like 27 or 34 or something like that. So quite a bit higher in captivity, but about 10 to 12 years, about a decade or so is what we're seeing for wild bears.
Are there any scents that bears don't like that will keep them away?
That's a great question. And it's one that I wish there was a really positive answer for. So anecdotally, just from people talking, from me doing site visit after site visit, talking to people, the two things that seem to work are ammonia and bleach. And there's no real study-based evidence for that, I should say. And I also really want to caution people, if you're using ammonia and your neighbor's using bleach, and those trash cans both get dumped in the same trash truck, you've basically made the Western Front in 1917. You made chlorine gas, and that's really dangerous for the garbage handlers, the waste handlers, and it could be dangerous for you, your neighbor, whatever. So especially if you personally were to say, oh, I'm out of ammonia today, I'm going to start using bleach. I don't think it works all that well anyway. I would caution people to stay away from that stuff just because it can be a danger.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. Combining the two.
Yeah, not good. Not good.
Yeah, not really. Okay, so there was actually, so with that scent, I looked it up actually really quickly. So one of the things that they mentioned is that pine sol, like some sort of really pungent smell like that,
Yep.
is a deterrent as well.
Yeah, again, anecdotally, I've heard that quite a bit. Without it being a controlled study or environment, I'm hesitant to say yes. You're welcome to try it. No harm in that. I will say though that bears are pretty frequently attracted to weird or curious smells. So this is kind of gross, but dirty diapers are something that we see over and over. Bears actually being attracted to. They'll pull them out of the garbage cans. It may work for a time. You may get a bear who really likes the scent of pine, or one that says, I can't really smell what's going on in there. I'm going to tear it apart just to make sure there's nothing good. Give it a try. No real harm in it. Just stay away from those caustic chemicals.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we use enrichment for our bears, and they really like different types of perfumes.
Yeah.
Really
So, one thing this is probably worth mentioning too, for anybody who does any kind of camping, it's really important that you limit those scents if you're going to be tent camping. So not having any food, of course, but not using any of those curious colognes, perfumes, anything like that, keeping those well away from where you're sleeping every night.
Yeah, we'll spray it on a tree and they're like rubbing up against the tree like,
Sure.
woo.
Yeah.
They love the Paris Hilton line. That's their favorite.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, good, cheap,
Yeah.
trashy perfume. They love it.
Yeah.
Don't wear it
Somebody
camping.
should email Paris and tell her.
Yeah, maybe we can make some money, Rebecca. Make a note of that one.
There we go.
Paris for bears.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's wonderful. It doesn't really look like there's too many other questions. So
Okay.
I think we're all good. So
Great. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's a whole area of the state that I usually don't get to speak to people about. I will say, if any questions come up or anything like that, log into the website, give us a call if you've got more questions about it. We're here to help. We're happy to work with you.
awesome. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank FWC, and I want to thank the attendees for coming and hanging out with us. I hope you all learned something, and we hope to see you in the future.
Hey, Miss Rebecca, one quick question though. We are recording this and we're going to get it up on our YouTube, right? So all of these awesome participants that came tonight, thank you so much. And of course, thanks to Chris for doing this for us. But please feel free to share it from our YouTube with others who couldn't be here. You guys took the first step in educating yourselves on coexisting with bears, but the more we can spread the word, that's really going to be what's going to change the way bears are viewed in our community. And so this group, I feel, is right at the forefront of making that happen. So thank you guys, and please share.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody. Good night.